Hello there. Today, I'd like to take you on a softly spoken audio tour of Stourhead, a wonderful historic house and garden in the county of Wiltshire in England. Stourhead is celebrated both for its stunning interiors and its exquisite pleasure grounds, which have appeared in several period dramas. Most notably, in the 2005 film adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. In this audio tour, we'll explore both the house and the gardens together, as I tell you a little bit of history about Stourhead and describe some of the many beautiful things you can see there. As usual, there'll be a slideshow of photographs on the video to accompany our tour. But there's no need for you to look at these if you don't want to. If you prefer, you can just settle back, close your eyes and relax, while my voice guides you. So, welcome to Stourhead. The Stourhead estate, which is over 2,500 acres in size, has existed since the 13th century. However, the house and garden that we're visiting today were both created in the 18th century, when the estate was bought by Henry Hoare. He was the son of a very wealthy banker, and in the early 1720s, he pulled down the ruined medieval manor house that had previously existed at Stourhead and commissioned a new mansion from the architect Colin Campbell. Campbell was an early pioneer of British Palladian architecture, a school of design based upon the principles of the Venetian architect Palladio. Palladio drew inspiration from the temples of ancient Greece and Rome, and this classical influence is immediately obvious when we look at the entrance to Stourhead House. It features an impressive portico with a substantial triangular pediment held up by 4 gigantic Ionic columns. Let's walk up one of the 2 symmetrical flights of stone steps that lead up to this portico and pass underneath it through the front door of the house. The first room we walk into is the entrance hall, and my goodness, this room was made to impress. It creates an immediate impact because it's been designed as a perfect cube, 30 feet tall, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet deep. And its towering magnificence and perfect symmetry are calculated to take any visitor's breath away the moment they enter the house. The cube's perfect proportions are emphasized by a high ceiling cornice made of ornate plasterwork, and 4 majestic door frames that are all encrusted with elaborate white stucco. The floor is made up of large square marble slabs in 2 tones of grey and white, which have been laid out to create a geometric checkerboard effect, like a giant chessboard. And on every wall, stately family portraits mounted in heavy gold frames are set off by sumptuous scarlet-painted walls. This is without doubt a room that has been deliberately designed to provoke awe and admiration, a striking showpiece that introduces newcomers to the wealth and authority of the Hoare family. Sitting on a table on the left-hand side of the entrance hall is another fittingly sumptuous expression of family pride. It's a large and rather curious-looking silver-gilt salt cellar that takes the form of a golden, double-headed eagle studded with many precious stones. This salt cellar would have been created to be an eye-catching centerpiece used in a grand dinner party setting. However, its design also has symbolic significance. The jewelled and gilded eagle encapsulates the history of the Hoare family because they originally made their fortune in the goldsmith's trade and then later adopted the eagle as their family crest. Let's continue now and walk on into the music room, which has a more intimate atmosphere than the entrance hall, although the same combination of scarlet walls, heavy stucco and gilt-frame pictures still adds grandeur to the room. There's an intricately carved white marble fireplace and 2 pianos, one an imposing grand piano and the other a smaller and more elegant square instrument that sits against one wall. However, sadly, the most elaborate instrument that ever stood in this room is now missing. A niche in the wall marks the spot where, for over 100 years, a pipe organ was installed. Today that niche holds only a gilded pier table and a mirror, because the organ was destroyed by a fire that ravaged the central part of the house in 1902. After the blaze, the building was carefully restored. But alas, the organ wasn't replaced, and so today only the niche remains to remind us of its former presence. There are 2 doors leading out from the music room, and by taking the one nearest to us, we can pass down a little red-painted passageway and find ourselves in the library. This has been built in one of 2 enormous wings that were added to either side of the main house in 1792 by Sir Richard Colt Hoare. Sir Richard was a keen book collector, and he designed his library on a grand scale. It's a huge room with a magnificent barrel-vaulted ceiling and incredibly tall bookcase niches fitted into every wall. In fact, the bookcases extend so far up that only the lower shelves can be reached by hand. But Sir Richard got around this problem by commissioning a set of wonderful mahogany library steps from the celebrated furniture maker Thomas Chippendale the Younger. These steps are large enough to be a full-size staircase, and they come complete with a banister and balustrade. However, they're also fitted with casters so that they can be wheeled around the library and used to make even the highest bookshelves accessible. As well as containing hundreds of beautifully bound antique books, the library is also splendidly decorated with soft green walls and a pair of semicircular paintings at opposite ends of the room, which are fitted into either end of the curved ceiling. On one side, there's a lunette, a semicircular wall fresco that shows the Greek sun god Apollo together with the 9 muses. On the opposite side of the room, another semicircular painting depicts scenes from the School of Athens Vatican fresco by Raphael. However, this Raphael copy isn't a lunette because it hasn't been painted directly onto a wall. Instead, it's been applied to the surface of a large semicircular window, and the natural light that floods in from outside illuminates the painted figures and makes them glow like beautiful stained glass. I love this library, but let's retrace our steps now back to the music room and walk through the other door on the far side of the room, which will take us into the garden hall. This room is so named because originally it was another hallway that led out into the Stourhead gardens. However, when Sir Richard Colt Hoare added his 2 massive new wings to the house, he removed the doors in this room and replaced them with windows in order to maintain the overall symmetry of the building. This room is once again painted in scarlet, with a heavily decorated white ceiling cornice. And opposite the windows, there are 2 ivory-painted Corinthian columns that flank a notable royal sculpture. This depicts the head and shoulders of Charles I, who, rather unfortunately, tends to be remembered today as the English king who lost his head. During the English Civil War, which ran from 1642 to 1651, Charles was tried for treason by Parliament and was executed on the 30th of January, 1649. He's now known as the Martyred King However, he still looks proud and rather handsome in this magnificent gilt bronze bust that was made in 1631 during happier times, and is said to have once been part of the king's own private art collection. Walking on through the garden hall, we'll come to the south apartments, 2 far smaller rooms that were built as private family accommodation and are still used for that purpose today. Stourhead was passed down through successive generations of the Hall family until 1917, when Sir Henry Hugh Arthur Hall's only son was tragically killed during World War I. As the estate was consequently left without an heir, Sir Henry decided that, after his own death, it should pass to the conservation charity, the National Trust, and they still own Stourhead today. However, in a rather nice line of continuity, a distant cousin of the family, Audrey Hall, still lives in a private apartment within the house, and these rooms are used by her. You can tell they're lived in. They have a much cosier atmosphere, and the first room features a comfortable-looking sofa and a table covered with family photographs, while the second room is painted in a restful shade of moss green and holds a refreshingly ordinary-looking family bookcase. The casual coziness of the south apartments is in complete contrast to the next room we'll enter, which is another grand stateroom. This is the saloon, which was created to be a place of entertainment. It's a large, flexible space that could be adapted to be a ballroom, a concert hall, or an extra-large dining room. These days, it features a variety of elegant neoclassical pieces of furniture. However, the decorative highlight of the saloon is, without doubt, the colourful Axminster carpet that graces the floor. Made especially for this room in the early 19th century, the carpet was saved by the servants during the 1902 fire, and is consequently now the oldest floor covering still left at Stourhead. It has a delightful pattern of cream and blue flowers on a scarlet background, which is still marvellously vivid thanks to careful conservation work that was carried out in 2015. In order to protect the newly restored carpet from the wear and tear of visitors, the National Trust has invested in an iMat, an ingenious copy made by transferring digital images of the original carpet onto modern matting. The result creates an almost seamless effect in the room. It's hard to tell which part of the floor covering is the authentic carpet and which part is the new iMat. And this means the original is protected without the decor scheme of the room being spoilt. Wandering up the centre of the saloon, we pass through a set of double doors and walk into the inner hall, which features an enormous white-painted double staircase. This is actually an Edwardian replacement, as the original staircase was destroyed by the 1902 fire, but it still fits in beautifully with the grand neoclassical proportions of the house. Beyond the inner hall, we'll turn left into the column room, a spacious, graceful apartment, decorated in a soft shade of ivory, and punctuated at one end by 2 painted Corinthian columns. This was once a bedroom, but it's now the light and airy setting for a fine collection of watercolour paintings. Most of them date from the 18th and 19th centuries. However, my favourite artwork in this room is a far more recent acquisition, a small watercolour depicting the gardens of Stourhead, which was painted by the 20th century artist John Piper. Piper was an official war artist during World War II, and he was known for his atmospheric and arresting paintings of landscapes and architecture. His view of the Stourhead Gardens is typical of his style, which blends both abstract and naturalistic techniques, and glows with brilliant colours. Let's walk next door now, into the Italian room, which was also formerly a bedroom. It features a magnificent domed alcove, which is where the bed would have once stood, although today the room is dedicated to the theme of the Grand Tour. This was once a fashionable activity for wealthy eldest sons who would travel across Europe for several months at a time. Theoretically, this was in order to develop their cultural knowledge and artistic education. But in practice, I think some of them viewed it as an extended jolly holiday. Nevertheless, the Hoare family were sincere in their enthusiasm for the arts, and several generations brought back artistic treasures to add to the family collection. In a wooden display cabinet at the centre of the Italian room, you can see a charming selection of sketches and diary extracts that were made by Sir Richard Colt Hoare during his own sojourn around Europe. However, the greatest grand tourist in the Hoare family was Sir Richard's grandfather, Henry Hoare II, whose passion for collecting led to him becoming known as Henry the Magnificent. Henry bought up many priceless artifacts while he was on his travels, and the most opulent of his finds is the star exhibit in the very next room we'll enter, the Cabinet Room. This scarlet-painted chamber is named after an incredibly lavish cabinet that Henry the Magnificent brought back to Stourhead from Italy. It's an amazing piece, with a blackwood surface veneer that is absolutely covered in shining gilt bronze ornaments, semi-precious jewels, and intricate pietra dura designs made out of colourful cut stones. The piece was created to be a collector's cabinet, and it's fitted with over 150 little drawers, many of which are hidden compartments designed for holding secret treasures. Originally, the cabinet belonged to a 16th century pope, Sixtus V, who, in British history, is best known as the pope who excommunicated not one, but two English monarchs, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Given his somewhat stormy relationship with the English crown, it's perhaps ironic that the Pope's prized collector's cabinet should have ended up in an English country house. But it certainly looks at home in the luxurious surroundings of Stourhead. The final room we'll visit in the house today is the picture gallery, which is in the other wing that was added by Sir Richard Colt Hoare, on the opposite side of the house to his library. This is yet another cavernous and stately room, painted in an intense shade of emerald green, and it's the setting for the family collection of oil paintings. The walls are thronged with monumental canvases from the British, French and Italian schools, and the collection includes works by the famous artists Salvator Rosa and Nicolas Poussin. Many of the paintings on display in here were, like the cabinet of Pope Sixtus, collected by Henry the Magnificent. However, Henry's greatest achievement isn't to be found in the house at all, but rather in the grounds outside, where he created an enchanting landscape garden. As we've now finished our tour of the house, let's continue our adventure by going to look at that garden and exploring its many wonders. To find our way there, we'll follow a path that leads from the house down a hill and into the valley where Henry decided to situate his new pleasure grounds. Landscape gardens were very popular in the later 17th and 18th centuries as a more naturalistic alternative to the symmetrical, formal gardens that had previously been fashionable. The idea was to create a scene that looked like a natural landscape, but to do it in an idealized way in order to create a scenic, rural paradise. There were several famous architects who specialized in making landscape gardens, the most famous being Capability Brown. However, Henry the Magnificent wanted to create his own scheme at Stourhead, and so although he worked with the renowned Palladian architect Henry Flitcroft, he planned much of the garden's design for himself. Using a team of 50 gardeners, Henry transformed the grounds of his estate, damming the local river to make a shimmering lake, and planting the surrounding hills of the valley with an array of oak, beech, ash, cedar and yew trees to create the effect of a beautiful natural woodland. Henry also decided to decorate his garden with a selection of follies, decorative buildings or structures that have no purpose other than to create a dramatic or romantic feature in the landscape. As we enter the garden, the first of these decorative structures that we see is the Bristol Cross, although technically this isn't actually a folly at all. Instead, it's a genuine medieval market cross, which originally stood in the city of Bristol. However, after it had been pulled down, Henry the Magnificent decided to buy it, and its intricately carved Gothic pinnacle certainly fulfills the role of a folly by creating a dramatic garden feature. Behind it, you can see another piece of authentic medieval architecture, St. Peter's Church, which dates from the 13th century but was renovated by Henry in the 1720s. Beyond the church and the cross, the lush green lawns of Stourhead unfold before us. And as we continue to follow our path, we'll curve around to the right and walk along the edge of the lake. Here, we'll discover the first purpose-built folly that Henry commissioned for his new garden, the Temple of Flora. This is a small but perfectly formed neoclassical temple with a pillared portico and 2 large windows overlooking the lake. Dedicated to the Roman goddess of the spring, the temple bears a carved Latin inscription over the doorway that, when translated, reads, "Keep away, anyone profane, keep away." Although we might not be feeling particularly profane at the moment, let's leave the goddess Flora to her temple and continue our walk, winding along the path and through the trees until we cross a bridge at the far end of the lake and begin to loop back along the other side of the water. Here we'll find a cluster of 3 follies, all built in very different styles. The first one we come to is a grotto, inspired by the Italian Renaissance, which takes us down a tunnel and into a series of underground chambers. The walls of these chambers are lined with flint, pebbles and tufa stone to create the atmosphere of a natural cave. And to complete the grotto effect, there are several trickling fountains and small pools of water. Peering through the gloom, we can make out 2 white marble statues, one of a formidable-looking river god and one of a sleepy-looking nymph. The nymph is reclining in a niche behind one of the fountains, and carved into the edge of the fountain pool, a verse by the poet Alexander Pope reads, "Nymph of the grot, these sacred springs I keep, and to the murmur of these waters sleep. Ah, spare my slumbers, gently tread the cave, and drink in silence, or in silence leave." Let's follow the nymph's instruction and gently tread our way out of the grotto, climbing the steep steps that lead us back up into the sweet fresh air. Around the next corner, we'll find another folly that has been built in a completely different style. A charming rustic little house with a thatched roof and arched mullioned windows that's known as the Gothic cottage. Just a few steps beyond the cottage is another classically inspired temple, although this one is much larger than the Temple of Flora. It's the Pantheon, an impressive domed folly modelled after the Pantheon in Rome, which contains a circular chamber fitted with niches to hold an array of marble sculptures. The original Roman Pantheon was a temple dedicated to all the gods, and at Stourhead, That eclectic principle has been upheld by mixing together statues of gods from ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt, along with a sculpture of the Christian saint, Susanna. Once we've admired the Pantheon, we can wander onwards and cross over a bridge that leads us past a tumbling cascade waterfall. This was also created by Henry the Magnificent to add a further dramatic feature to his landscape. And just beyond it, we can look up through the trees and glimpse another folly, the Temple of Apollo. This is the third and final classically inspired folly that we'll see at Stourhead, and it's perhaps the most beautiful focal point in the whole garden. It's a perfectly circular temple that's set up on the side of a hill where it commands the most wonderful views across the lake. The temple was built for Henry the Magnificent by his architect, Flitcroft, in 1772, and with its elegant columns and curving domed roof, it adds an enchanted touch of romance to the Stourhead landscape. These romantic associations were further increased in 2005, when the Temple of Apollo became the setting for Darcy's proposal to Elizabeth Bennet in director Joe Wright's film adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice. In the same film, we also see Elizabeth, played by Keira Knightley, running through a rainstorm across a beautiful 5-arched Palladian stone bridge. And this bridge is the final garden feature we'll come to as we finish off our walk around the lake. The surface of the bridge has been turfed rather than paved, which makes it look rather magical, and the reflection of the 5 bridge arches in the calm lake completes the atmosphere of tranquil beauty in this lovely place. Unsurprisingly, the beauty of the gardens at Stourhead have made them a popular location for period dramas over the years, including the film Barry Lyndon and TV adaptations of Agatha Christie's Miss Marple and Anthony Trollope's He Knew He Was Right. Fans of cult British television will also no doubt be fascinated to learn that the neoclassical front of Stourhead House was used as inspiration for the model mansion belonging to Lady Penelope in the sci-fi puppet series Thunderbirds. In the wider Stourhead estate, there are several more follies to explore if you wish to extend your walk. There's a magnificent obelisk, a curious stone water pump, and a brick-built folly that stands over 50 metres high and is known as King Alfred's Tower. However, our ramble around the lake is coming to an end now, so let's make our way back up the path to the lovely old stone stable block, where you'll find some shops to visit and a charmingly traditional English pub called the Spread Eagle Inn. Our tour of Stourhead is now complete, and I hope you've enjoyed exploring the impressive house and delightful gardens with me. Before you leave, why not take a moment to subscribe to the Sounds Curious channel so that you can join me again soon for another audio adventure. It's been a pleasure to guide you around this fabulous historic place. And so, until next time, thank you for your company. Goodbye.